Blood dripped down Freya's arm as she raised the ritual dagger above her head, her glassy eyes fixed on the enormous serpent twisting at the center of the stone circle. "Jörmungandr," the priestess shouted, "I saw you in the waters of my dream, and now I face you in flesh." The crowd stepped back in terror as the beast rose, its black scales gleaming beneath the blood-red moonlight. Thank you for being here, watching this story unfold. This channel is just beginning its journey, and every single subscriber means the world. It keeps this project alive and helps us reach that first 1,000. If you enjoy these tales of Viking life, struggle, and ancient mysteries, please consider subscribing. Also, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always powerful to know the reach of these stories. Your support truly makes a difference. The sharp, salty scent of the sea mingled with the faint smoke rising from the hearth inside Freya's small cabin. Outside, the fjord stretched wide and still, its waters dark and mirror-like beneath the early morning light. The cold air bit at her skin through the thin wool of her tunic, carrying with it the distant sounds of a village waking, a chorus of voices, the rhythmic slap of oars dipping into water, and the low murmur of fishermen preparing their nets. Yet, despite the familiar stirrings of life around her, a weight pressed heavily upon Freya's chest. It was a heaviness she carried deeper than muscle or bone, an ancient knowledge wrapped in shadow and omen. Freya Gunhild's daughter sat up abruptly from the straw-filled mattress that had barely offered her rest. Her black hair, tangled and damp from sweat, clung to her pale face. She blinked slowly, trying to shake the remnants of the nightmare that had gripped her once again. The same dream, the same terrifying vision, a vast serpent, coiled and twisting beneath dark waters that stretched into endless night. The image had haunted her for 3 nights in a row, each one more vivid and more urgent than the last. Her eyes, a penetrating shade of twilight blue, scanned the small room. The cabin was modest but sacred, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Along the walls hung strips of animal pelts and bundles of dried herbs, their pungent aromas mingling with the smoke that spiraled from the small fire pit at the center. A collection of carved bones and runes lay scattered atop a low wooden table, the symbols etched deep into their surfaces, charged with ancient power. This was both sanctuary and prison. Freya's fingers trembled as she reached for the carved raven amulet resting on the table. The cool silver was smooth beneath her touch, and the shape of the bird, wings outstretched in flight, seemed to pulse faintly with a life of its own. She drew the amulet close, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon her once more. She was the clan's priestess, the seer who communed with the gods and the spirits that dwell beyond the waking world. Her visions were gifts, but also curses. The morning light filtered weakly through the narrow window, casting long shadows that danced on the wooden walls. Outside, the village of Ravenholm was stirring. The cottages clustered near the fjord's edge, their thatched roofs frosted with lingering dew. Smoke lazily curled from chimneys as fires were stoked and breakfast prepared. Children's laughter echoed faintly as they dashed barefoot across the damp earth, and the steady thud of wooden practice, swords striking shields rang from the training grounds near the mead hall. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, tension simmered. Whispers of Freya's dreams had already begun to spread, seeping like a cold wind through the hearts of those who heard. Jörmungandr, the Midgard Serpent, was a name spoken with reverence and dread. The ancient tales told of the serpent so vast it encircled the world, its awakening signaling chaos and the unraveling of time. To see it in dreams was more than a warning, it was a summons. Freya rose, the chill gnawing at her exposed arms despite the thick layers she wore. Her ritual tattoos, dark swirls, and runes inked into her pale skin, seemed to shimmer faintly in the morning light, a silent testament to her sacred duties. She moved to the small fire pit, where embers still glowed softly beneath a blackened cauldron. The herbal infusion she had brewed the night before steamed gently, its scent earthy and bitter. She took a small sip, letting the warmth spread through her chest, steadying her racing heart. Outside, a lone raven croaked sharply, its cry slicing through the quiet. Freya's gaze drifted toward the horizon where the fjord met the sky. Clouds hung low, heavy with the promise of rain. A storm was gathering. It was as if nature itself responded to the unrest deep within her visions. She wrapped a thick cloak of wolf fur around her shoulders and stepped outside. The cold air stung her cheeks, and the damp earth beneath her boots felt soft yet firm. The village lay beneath a thin veil of mist, the early sun casting a pale glow on the rolling hills and dark waters. The scent of salt and pine was sharp and cleansing, mingled with the faint musk of livestock in nearby pens. Freya's footsteps were purposeful as she made her way toward the center of the village. The people parted respectfully as she passed, sensing the gravity that clung to her like a shadow. Mothers hushed their children, and even the boisterous fishermen lowered their voices. She could feel their eyes on her back, some filled with hope, others shadowed by fear or doubt. As she walked, her mind drifted to the weight of what she carried. To be priestess of the Raven clan was to bear the whispers of the gods and the burdens of fate. Rituals, sacrifices, omens, these were the threads woven into every day of her life. Yet now, those threads felt frayed, as if the very fabric of their world trembled on the brink of unraveling. At the village square, she spotted a small figure crouched near the dirt, drawing patterns with a stick. Thora, the 9-year-old daughter of Gunnar, the fisherman, was lost in her own world. The child's pale hair was wild in the morning breeze, and her blue eyes sparkled with a mixture of wonder and fear. Freya paused, the sight of Thora's earnest concentration stirring something primal within her. The girl's innocent drawings etched into the earth mirrored the visions that had haunted her nights. A winding serpent, long and sinuous, with a triangular head that seemed to watch with unblinking eyes. "What do you draw, little one?" Freya's voice was gentle but carried the weight of authority. Thora looked up, her gaze steady despite the tremor of unease beneath it. "The great serpent from the sea," she whispered. "It came to me in my dreams last night. It told me the world will change." A shiver ran down Freya's spine. It was not just her who was touched by these visions. The shadows were spreading, reaching beyond the walls of her mind. She knelt beside the girl, taking her cold hands in her own. "You have seen what the gods reveal to me," Freya said softly. "It is a sign, but fear must not consume us. We must understand, prepare, and stand together." Thora nodded solemnly, her small face etched with the seriousness of someone far beyond her years. Freya felt the stirrings of hope amid the dread. The child was more than a witness. She would be the future. Turning from the girl, Freya made her way to the edge of the village, where the forest began its dark embrace. The ancient wood stretched vast and silent, trees gnarled and ancient, their branches weaving a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a restless green dance. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and moss. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically against a trunk, and the faint rustle of small creatures scurrying through the underbrush echoed through the stillness. Freya paused, closing her eyes. She breathed deeply, drawing in the forest's breath, seeking the calm within the storm. The runes she carried, etched into bone and stone, whispered secrets she barely understood. The gods spoke in riddles, visions in dreams, signs in nature, and the silent language of the ancestors. Her solitude was broken by a sudden crack of a branch. She opened her eyes to see Ragnar Thorson approaching. The jarl's presence was commanding, even in the soft light of morning. His weathered face bore the marks of countless battles, and his gray eyes held the wisdom of years. His thick beard, woven with amber beads, shifted slightly as he spoke. Freya, he greeted gravely. Yet, despite the darkness, a fragile thread of hope glimmered. Through dreams and ancient rites, through the courage to face the unknown, the clan might yet survive the coming storm. As the sun climbed higher, casting light over the fjord and hills, Freya prepared herself to carry the weight of prophecy and the fate of her people into the gathering twilight. The early afternoon sun was waning, casting long shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the village of Ravnholm. Freya's steps were heavy as she left the forest's edge behind, the weight of the serpent's looming presence pressing upon her like a shroud. The dreams had become more than visions. They had become a harbinger feeding on the fears of her people. Yet still, she carried the fragile hope that understanding might temper the dread. As she walked toward the simple stone well at the village center, her eyes caught a movement. Quick, uncertain, trembling. There, huddled beside the rough wooden fence that enclosed the clan's mead hall, was Thora. The girl's small frame was wrapped in a threadbare wool cloak, but it did little to protect her from the chill that crept beneath the thickening clouds. Her pale hair, tangled and wild, fell over her face in soft waves, hiding the trace of tears that tracked down her cheeks. Freya's heart clenched. The child had seemed strong before, resolute even, but now something vulnerable showed, a shadow beneath the light. She approached slowly, mindful not to startle her. "Thora," Freya said softly, kneeling beside the girl. The child looked up, eyes wide and glossy, reflecting a storm of emotions, fear, confusion, and a loneliness that reached beyond her years. The girl's voice trembled as she spoke. I saw more in the dream last night. Not just the serpent, but darkness. Something waiting beneath the waves, watching. It spoke to me, Freya. It said I must leave, that I am not safe here." Freya pressed her hand gently over Thora's small one, feeling the rapid beat of a frightened heart beneath fragile skin. Doubt flickered momentarily through Freya's mind. Would the clan accept the child's warnings? Would they see these visions as the sacred messages they truly were, or as the ramblings of a frightened girl? The priestess's voice was steady, though inside, a tempest churned. "You are not alone in this, Thora. We share these visions, these warnings. The serpent stirs not just in dreams, but in the world around us. You must not run from the fear, but face it with us." The child's breath hitched, a thin mist escaping her lips in the cold air. "But what if it comes for me? What if it wants to take me beneath the sea?" Her gaze faltered, the innocence of childhood breaking beneath the weight of prophecy. Freya's mind raced. The choice was stark: to shelter the child, to keep her close and train her as the future priestess, meant exposing her to dangers both seen and unseen. But to send her away, to protect her by distance, risked severing the fragile thread that tied the clan's future to the god's will. Her gaze drifted toward the distant fjord, waves shimmering under a pallid sky. The sea was both cradle and grave, a source of life and death alike. Freya inhaled deeply, fighting the rising tide of fear within. The burden of leadership was a lonely road, paved with impossible choices. Yet she knew what her heart demanded. "You will stay," she said firmly, the words echoing with the weight of ancient resolve. "The gods have chosen you, Thora. You are part of the clan's fate. We will protect you, as you will one day protect us." The girl's eyes searched Freya's, searching for doubt, for hesitation. Finding none, she nodded slowly, a fragile hope kindling within her. But the moment of quiet was shattered by the sudden arrival of Gunnar, Thora's father. His rugged face was drawn tight with worry, eyes flickering between his daughter and Freya. "You should not linger here, priestess," he said gruffly, the edge in his voice betraying his fear. "Darkness is no place for children or women. The serpent's shadow grows long, and it will not spare the weak." Freya met his gaze evenly, her own fear tempered by the clarity of her duty. The weak are often the strongest in the sight of the gods. Gunnar. Thora's visions are a gift, not a curse. They show us what must be faced. Gunnar shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenching into fists. I will not lose her, he said simply. No dream or vision will take my daughter from me. Freya's heart ached at the fierce protection in his voice. She understood. As a priestess, she was bound to a path that demanded sacrifice, sacrifices of love, safety, and certainty. Then we will stand together, Freya said quietly. The serpent may rise, but so shall we. Not in fear, but in strength. Gunnar nodded, but the flicker of doubt lingered in his eyes. The coming days would test all of them, unraveling bonds and forging new ones in the fire of destiny. As the sun dipped lower, clouds thickened into a dark quilt over the fjord. Freya lingered a moment longer with Thora, brushing the girl's wild hair from her face, tracing the faint star-shaped birthmark on her wrist. You carry the future in you, little one, Freya whispered. And no matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes. Thora smiled, a rare light breaking through the shadows. But beneath the surface, the serpent waited. It coiled not only in the waters, but in the hearts of men. Doubt, fear, and old grudges stoked like hidden fires. Freya felt the weight of these unseen threats as keenly as the cold wind biting at her skin. The clan's unity was fragile, and trust was a currency in short supply. Her thoughts turned inevitably to Eirik, the jarl's brother. His scowl and sharp words had echoed in her ears since the morning gathering. His disbelief was a threat, his disdain a poison spreading among the warriors. Would he challenge her again? Would he sow dissent that might unravel the fragile fabric holding Ravenholm together? The path ahead was shrouded in shadow and uncertainty, and Freya knew she would need more than visions and rituals to face it. She rose, the chill of dusk settling into her bones, and turned toward the mead hall where the clan's leaders gathered to discuss the coming night. Her heart beat steady now, a drum of resolve in the gathering darkness. The serpent's dreams were no longer hers alone. They belonged to the clan, to the future, and she would stand guard, no matter the cost. The evening had settled over Ravenholm with a heavy cloak of silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire within Freya's small cabin. Outside, the mist curled low over the village, blurring the edges of thatched roofs and turning the familiar landscape into a shadowed realm where the line between reality and dreams grew thin. Freya moved quietly, her footsteps softened by layers of fur and woven rugs that covered the wooden floor. Her hands, steady though marked by the day's wear, carefully arranged pieces of cloth and herbs on a low table near the hearth. Thora lay wrapped in a worn wolf pelt on a bed of soft furs, her slender frame barely visible beneath the thick coverings. The girl's pale skin was flushed from the cold, a faint tremble passing through her as she shifted restlessly against the warmth of the fire. Freya watched her for a moment, the sharp edge of worry pressing in her chest. The visions the child carried had left her fragile, caught between the worlds of waking and dreaming, haunted by images far too vast for one so small. The priestess knelt beside the bed, lifting a small wooden bowl filled with a steaming brew of wild herbs and honey. She placed it gently within Thora's reach, the sweet aroma filling the air with a faint but comforting sweetness. The girl's blue eyes fluttered open, reflecting the flickering firelight with a fragile clarity. "Drink this," Freya whispered, her voice a soft thread woven between the crackles of the hearth. "It will warm your blood and calm your spirit." Thora reached for the bowl with trembling hands, bringing it slowly to her lips. The liquid was bitter beneath the honey's kiss, but it soothed the ache deep within her chest. As she drank, her gaze fixed on Freya, curious, searching, yet distant, as if trying to grasp something just beyond reach. Freya's own eyes softened, the weight of the priestess's mantle momentarily lifted by the child's quiet trust. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of pale hair behind Thora's ear, a simple gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. The faint scent of salt and pine clung to the girl. Freya settled onto a low stool beside the bed, her gaze drifting to the small bundle of runes and bones resting on the table. The symbols were carved with care, each holding a fragment of the ancient knowledge she was sworn to protect. Yet tonight, they felt distant, like echoes of a world slipping through her fingers. Her thoughts turned again to Eirik. His scorn and disbelief had been a relentless storm against her fragile authority, but in recent hours, she sensed a subtle shift, an opening, fragile yet real. Perhaps the visions had begun to crack the hard armor of his skepticism. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the faint cries of night birds and the distant slap of waves against the rocky shore. The world beyond the cabin was cold and unforgiving, but within these walls, a fragile sanctuary had taken root. Freya's eyes met Thora's again as the girl stirred, her gaze lifting slowly to meet the priestess's. No words passed between them, but in that quiet exchange, a bond was forged, a silent vow to face the coming darkness together. The hours passed with measured calm. Freya took a small leather pouch from her belt, carefully extracting a handful of dried herbs. She crushed them between her fingers, releasing a pungent aroma that mingled with the smoke rising from the fire. The scent was grounding, an anchor to the earth amid the swirling tides of fear. She placed the herbs atop the hearth stones, where the flames licked eagerly, sending tendrils of fragrant smoke curling toward the low ceiling. The ritual was simple yet powerful, a gesture of protection and hope woven into the ancient rhythms of their people. At one point, Thora's hand twitched, reaching unconsciously toward the amulet that hung from her neck, a rough-hewn stone, worn smooth by years of touch. Freya noticed the small mark of dirt beneath the child's fingernails and moved to brush it away gently, careful not to startle her. In the soft glow of the fire, the child's eyes closed once more, and Freya allowed herself to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. This moment, fragile and filled with quiet care, was a balm against the storm gathering beyond the walls. She thought of the serpent, Jörmungandr, the ancient force coiled beneath the waves, its presence a shadow looming over their fates. Yet here, in this humble cabin, surrounded by the warmth of fire and the fragile breath of a child, the future held a fragile promise. She reached out, taking Thora's hand in hers, their fingers intertwining in a small but powerful gesture. No words were needed. In the silence, they shared an unspoken understanding that together they might face whatever darkness awaited. The night deepened, and the fire's glow softened to embers. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint pulse of the world's ancient rhythms, the turning of tides, the whisper of gods, and the slow, steady heartbeat of the clan. Freya sat watch, her eyes tracing the shadows that danced on the walls, her mind weaving prayers and hopes into the silent fabric of the night. The serpent's dream was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the child, to the clan, to the fragile thread of life that bound them all. And as the first pale fingers of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with quiet light, Freya felt the weight of the coming day settle upon her once more. But for now, in this moment of quiet, there was only the warmth of fire, the fragile breath of a child, and the unyielding promise of hope. The chill of the dawn seeped into every corner of Ravenholm, the village still cloaked in mist and the lingering shadows of night. Freya's breath came steady, each exhale a pale cloud in the cold air as she paced the edges of the village square, the weight of her visions pressing heavier than ever. Though the moon had long receded, its bloody glow seemed to linger in her mind, the image of Jörmungandr coiling beneath the stones like a dark promise etched in her soul. Word had traveled fast. The whispers that had begun as fearful murmurs among the children now rippled through the village like wildfire, igniting unease among the elders and stirring apprehension in the warriors. Beyond the boundaries of their fjord, the news of strange omens, unexplained tremors beneath the earth, and shadowed rituals at the stone circle began to spread. And with it came the first stirrings of external eyes turning toward Ravnholm. Freya's boots crunched over the frost-laden earth as she made her way to the mead hall, where the clan's leaders were gathering once again. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settled between men who understood the fragile border between survival and ruin. Ragnar Thorson sat at the head of the rough-hewn wooden table, his scarred hands folded tightly. His eyes, usually so sharp and commanding, now carried the weary weight of a man who had long borne the burden of leadership, and now faced a threat he could neither wield an axe against nor dismiss as mere superstition. Around him sat the clan's fiercest warriors and trusted advisers, their faces grim, their voices hushed but urgent. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits along the walls. Freya's presence drew a mixture of reverence and unease. Some saw her as the voice of the gods, others as a harbinger of doom. Before she could speak, a figure entered, jerking the room's attention. A hunter from the neighboring village of Skjold, his clothes dusted with the grime of the forest and his face weathered by harsh winds and long days tracking beasts. His eyes were wide, haunted, and as he approached Ragnar, his voice trembled. "They say the earth itself groans beneath Ravnholm," he reported, "and the waters in the fjord churn without wind or tide. Strange lights flicker over the stone circle at night, and the old woman, Freya's kin, vanished without a trace near the northern woods." A low murmur rippled through the hall. The disappearance of an elder from Freya's family was no small matter. It hinted at unseen dangers encroaching on their lands. Ragnar's fingers tapped the table, the sound sharp in the heavy silence. Freya stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "These are the signs I have seen in my dreams. The serpent stirs beneath us, not just in shadow, but in flesh and spirit. We cannot ignore these warnings." Eirik Thorson's expression twisted with disdain as he rose abruptly. His green eyes flashed with anger, the fire of his skepticism burning fiercely. Enough with this fear-mongering. The earth trembles for many reasons: beasts stirring, shifting stones. The lights? Likely travelers or tricksters playing at old magics. This serpent is nothing but a tale to keep women like you in power. His words cut through the room like a blade. Some warriors nodded, others frowned, the division growing like a wound in the clan's unity. Ragnar's gaze flicked between the two, the weight of his decision pressing down upon him. "We cannot afford division now," he said quietly but firmly. "The clan's strength lies in its unity. Freya, prepare the ritual once more, and Eirik, you will lead a party to the northern woods at dawn. Find this lost woman, and if there are threats, we will face them together." Eirik's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly, turning to gather his men. The room emptied with hurried purpose, the air thick with silent tensions and unspoken fears. Outside, the cold wind bit deeper, carrying with it the scent of pine and salt from the fjord. Freya lingered a moment, her gaze lifting toward the horizon where dark clouds gathered like an approaching storm. The world was shifting beneath their feet, and she wondered how long their fragile peace would hold. Over the next days, Ravnholm found itself caught in a tightening web of watchful eyes and anxious whispers. Traders from distant settlements paused their journeys, uneasy at the mention of strange happenings near the fjord. Hunters reported shadows moving just beyond the trees, and the children's dreams of the serpent grew more vivid, their fearful cries echoing through the night. Freya's cabin became a sanctuary for those seeking answers, a place where whispers of prophecy mingled with the smoke of burning herbs. She spent long hours listening to the dreams of the clan's youth, tracing patterns in the runes, and preparing for the rituals that might stave off whatever darkness now edged closer. But the pressures grew. Elders questioned her visions, and some men muttered about her influence over Ragnar, whispering doubt. Late that night, as the village lay wrapped in uneasy sleep, Freya sat alone by her hearth. The firelight flickered against the carved bones and runes, casting shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. Her mind churned with the day's events, the hunter's tale, Eirik's scorn, the whispers of outsiders drawn by the rumors. Her fingers brushed the silver raven amulet resting against her chest, its cool weight grounding her. In the distance, the wind carried a faint cry, a call she could not yet understand. A sudden, sharp knock shattered the silence. Freya rose swiftly, tension tightening her muscles. At the door stood a young messenger, breathless and wide-eyed. "The Skjold clan sends word," he panted. "They will come to Ravnholm at dawn. They fear the serpent's awakening threatens all the fjords. They demand to see the priestess and the jarl. They warn of war if the signs are ignored." The words struck like a hammer blow. The world beyond their village was no longer distant. It pressed close, demanding reckoning. Freya's heart thundered in her chest. The serpent's shadow had grown beyond dreams and omens. It was now a force threatening to unravel the delicate threads that held their lives and their future together. Dawn approached with a cold, hard edge. Freya knew the clan stood at a crossroads. To face the fears stirring within and without would require all their strength and the courage to embrace the unknown. The serpent's coil tightened, and the choice was theirs, to be swallowed by terror or to rise, united, into the uncertain dawn. The wind moaned through the village, a haunting chorus that echoed the restless beating of a heart caught between past and future. Freya's gaze lifted to the pale sky, a silent prayer woven between the clouds. The gods were watching. The time had come to answer. The night had deepened into a thick, suffocating darkness, the kind that seemed to swallow even the faintest flicker of hope. Ravnholm's village square, usually a place of communal warmth and shared stories, had transformed into a chamber of whispered fears and watchful eyes. Torches sputtered in the cold wind, casting wavering shadows against the walls of timber and stone, while the heavy scent of damp earth and smoke clung stubbornly to the air. At the heart of this storm stood Freya, Gunhild's daughter, her figure silhouetted against the flickering flames, the intricate blue of her ritual tunic almost swallowed by the night. Her gaze was steady, but beneath the serene surface, her mind reeled with the weight of what was to come. The serpent's dreams had become reality. The ancient, whispered warnings were no longer confined to vision and fear. They had taken shape in the flesh, in the shifting shadows that haunted the edges of the fjord. The stone circle atop the hill loomed beyond the village, a silent witness to centuries of rites and secrets. Tonight, it was a beacon of fragile hope and terrible peril. The clan had gathered there under Freya's guidance, warriors and elders alike, their faces a mosaic of doubt, conviction, and dread. Among them stood Ragnar Thorason, the jarl, his weathered features etched with the heaviness of command. His eyes, normally sharp and commanding, flicked between the priestess and the restless crowd. Beside him, Eirik Thorson's presence was a stark contrast, tense, defiant, a living embodiment of discord. Freya's heart ached with the knowledge that this night would break more than the silence. It would fracture the fragile unity holding the clan together. She had long known that her visions would not be met with universal faith. The serpent's shadow had stirred not only the waters but the fears and rivalries within the hearts of the people. As the ritual began, Freya raised her arms, her voice rising in a chant that wove through the night like a thread of silver light. The ancient words spoken in the tongue of the ancestors carried power, a desperate plea to the gods and spirits. The crowd's murmurs fell away, replaced by a tense stillness that pressed on the soul. Even the wind seemed to hush, as if the world itself held its breath. But then, the earth trembled beneath their feet. A low rumble rolled through the stones, faint at first, then growing in intensity. An ominous heartbeat from beneath the soil. The circle's center cracked open, the jagged lines glowing faintly with a blue light, as if the very bones of the earth were awakening. From the fissure emerged a dark, sinuous form. The serpent, no longer just in dreams or whispers, uncoiled before them, its scales shimmering with a strange, otherworldly sheen. Its eyes burned like embers, ancient and knowing, a force older than the mountains themselves. The crowd recoiled, fear and awe mingling in their gasps. Some fell to their knees, voices raised in desperate prayer. Others gripped their weapons tighter, prepared for battle against a foe no sword could cleave. Eirik stepped forward, the tension coiling within him like a storm ready to break. His green eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This is madness," he spat, voice sharp and cutting. "A trick of the gods, or worse, a curse brought upon us by this woman's visions." Freya met his gaze without faltering, her own eyes burning with unyielding resolve. "This is no illusion, Eirik. The serpent has come because we have awoken it. It is neither ally nor enemy. It is a force that demands respect, balance, and sacrifice. But what choice do we have?" Eirik's voice rose, laced with desperation. "Do you ask us to bow to a monster? To offer our lives and blood to an ancient shadow?" "The choice was never ours to make," Freya replied softly. "The serpent is part of the world's great cycle, destruction and rebirth intertwined. We stand at the edge of change. Denial will only bring ruin." A murmur spread through the crowd, some nodding, others shaking their heads in fear and dissent. Ragnar stepped forward, the weight of his authority settling heavily upon his broad shoulders. "We must act, not with blind fury, but with wisdom," the jarl declared, his voice steady but burdened. "Freya, lead the rites. Eirik, stand with her. Together, we face what comes, not divided by fear, but united by purpose." Eirik's jaw clenched, his expression conflicted, but the jarl's command was law. Slowly, he sheathed his sword and took his place beside Freya, the tension between them palpable. The priestess resumed her chant, voice weaving through the cold night air, rising and falling like the tide. As she moved in a deliberate circle, she sprinkled sacred herbs and oils, their aromas mingling with the earth's breath. The serpent watched silently, its massive head flicking with a subtle awareness. Then, as Freya stopped, her gaze locked with the creature's burning eyes. She drew the bronze dagger from her belt, the metal cool and familiar in her hand. Her breath hitched, and with steady purpose, she sliced her palm, the blood welling and dripping onto the cracked earth at her feet. "Jörmungandr," she intoned, voice thick with ancient power. "I offer my blood, my spirit, my life if needed, to calm your rage and bind your fury. Protect our clan, and through this bond, we shall find balance." The serpent's massive coils shifted, its eyes narrowing as the blood seeped into the soil. A low, rumbling hiss echoed from its throat, a sound like thunder beneath the waves. The air thrummed with energy, the boundary between worlds thinning to a fragile veil. Then, without warning, Eirik moved. His sword flashed, cutting through the air toward the serpent's shimmering scales. The blow landed, slicing flesh that was at once solid and ethereal. From the wound, a black mist poured forth, swirling in a vortex of shadow and cold. It engulfed Eirik, wrapping him in visions too vast and terrible for mortal mind alone. Visions of worlds breaking apart, of time unraveling, and of the serpent's unending coil. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, the weight of the serpent's curse pressing down upon him. Freya rushed forward, pressing her bleeding hand to his brow, sharing the warmth and strength of her own blood. See through my eyes, she whispered fiercely. Understand the truth hidden beneath fear. The mist receded, leaving Eirik pale and trembling but awake. His eyes, once filled with scorn, now held a dawning comprehension. I see, he breathed. The first light of dawn painted the horizon with a pale wash of pink and gold, softening the harsh outlines of the fjord and the village beneath it. The air was crisp, the chill lingering from a night heavy with tension and ancient power. The stone circle, perched atop the hill like a silent sentinel, bore the weight of what had transpired: fractured earth, scorched soil, and the lingering scent of burnt herbs and blood. Freya stood at the edge of the circle, the cold biting at her skin beneath the folds of her dark blue ritual tunic. Her breath rose in faint clouds as she exhaled slowly, muscles taut and weary from the strain of the night's ordeal. The serpent had retreated, its massive form swallowed once more by the earth, but its presence was etched deep into the clan's shared memory. The aftershocks of its awakening rippled through the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed the ritual, binding them in a fragile web of understanding and unease. Her gaze shifted to Eirik, who knelt just a few steps away. His green eyes, once defiant and cold, now shimmered with a fragile vulnerability that unsettled even the hardened warriors nearby. The dark mist that had engulfed him moments ago seemed to have left marks deeper than any wound, a weight pressing against his soul. His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, sweat mingling with the dust on his skin, his strong hands trembling as they rested on his knees. Freya approached slowly, mindful of the silence that had settled over the circle. The clan's warriors and elders remained rooted in place, their faces a mix of awe, relief, and lingering fear. Even Ragnar, ever the stoic leader, stood uncharacteristically still, his gray eyes reflecting the enormity of the night's revelations. Kneel no longer. Freya's voice broke the stillness, steady but gentle. You have faced more than any man should bear. Eirik looked up, the lines of pain and confusion etching his face. For a moment, he struggled to find words, his mouth opening and closing like a salmon caught in a net. Then, with a shaky breath, he spoke, his voice low and raw with new understanding. I was blind, priestess, deaf to the whispers of the gods and the warnings of the earth. But now, I see the truth behind your visions. The serpent's awakening is not doom, but change, a reckoning that demands we rise, not fall. A murmur rippled through the gathered clan, some nodding in agreement, others still wrestling with disbelief. The divide that had threatened to sunder Ravenholm now seemed to waver, the fragile threads of trust beginning to mend. Ragnar stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on Eirik's shoulder. His voice, roughened by years of command, carried a note of hard-won approval. You speak with the voice of wisdom now, brother. Let this night be the turning point where doubt yields to understanding. Eirik inclined his head, the weight of his former pride laid bare. I owe my life, and my sight, to Freya. Without her courage and sacrifice, I would be lost in darkness still. Freya's eyes softened, the tension within her easing as she met Eirik's gaze. The animosity that had once simmered between them gave way to a fragile bond forged in shared ordeal. You faced the serpent and lived, she said quietly. Not all would have made the same choice. At that moment, a small figure emerged from the shadows, a child wrapped in a wolf pelt, eyes wide and bright despite the exhaustion etched into her face. Thora stepped forward, her pale hair catching the early light like a halo. She moved with a quiet assurance that belied her years, her gaze settling on Eirik and then on Freya. You are both part of the serpent's story now, she said softly, voice carrying the weight of innocence and prophecy intertwined. But there is hope in the coil, just as there is darkness. The gathered clan fell into a hush, the child's words weaving a delicate thread of hope through the heavy air. Mothers clutched their children closer, Warriors relaxed their grips on weapons, and a sense of cautious peace began to seep into the stones themselves. Ragnar raised his voice once more, his tone resolute and commanding. Let this dawn mark not only the passing of night, but the beginning of a new chapter for Ravnholm. We stand together, priestess, warriors, and kin, bound by fate, strengthened by courage. Freya felt the weight of those words settle within her, a promise not just to the clan, but to the gods who watched from beyond the veil. The path ahead would be fraught with peril and sacrifice, but for now, there was unity. As the sun climbed higher, warming the frost-tipped earth, Freya lowered her gaze to the ground. The scar on her arm throbbed faintly, a reminder of the blood she had offered and the pact she had forged. The serpent's coil was not broken, but held in balance by fragile hands. Eirik rose beside her, steady now, his green eyes no longer hardened with skepticism, but glimmering with respect and something softer, gratitude. His voice, when he spoke again, was steady and clear. Freya, I was wrong to doubt you. The gods have shown me their will through you. I will stand by your side, not as an adversary, but as an ally. She gave a small nod, the unspoken forgiveness passing between them like a healing wind. The long road of reconciliation was just beginning, but this moment was a foundation stone laid in the shifting sands of fate. Together, they turned toward the village, where the first stirrings of life resumed. A child's laughter carried on the breeze, the clatter of tools preparing for the day ahead, and the distant call of a raven, soaring high against the awakening sky. Freya's heart was heavy but steady. The serpent in her dreams was no longer a solitary shadow haunting her nights. It was a shared burden, a symbol of transformation that demanded courage beyond the sword. It called for listening, for embracing the unknown with open arms, and for trusting in the bonds of kinship that no darkness could sever. As the clan gathered to prepare for the days to come, Freya glanced once more at Thora, the child whose visions had echoed her own. There, in the young girl's bright eyes, she saw the promise of renewal, a future shaped not by fear, but by the unyielding spirit of those who dared to face the serpent's coil and walk through the fire. The winds shifted, carrying with them the scent of pine and salt, the whispers of gods and ancestors entwined in a song as old as the earth itself. In that song, Freya found a fragile peace, a moment of clarity before the journey ahead. For in the heart of the serpent lay not only destruction, but the eternal dance of death and rebirth. And in embracing that dance, the clan of the Ravens would survive, transformed, united, and ready to face whatever storms the gods might send. The days that followed the serpent's awakening unfolded slowly, like the uncoiling of a great shadow beneath the fjord's surface. Ravnholm had survived the night that had threatened to shatter it, but the echoes of that gathering trembled still in the hearts of its people. The villagers moved with a cautious rhythm, their steps measured yet determined, as if each breath drawn was a quiet defiance against the lingering dread. The stone circle on the hill, once a place of ancient rites and whispered prayers, now bore fresh scars, cracks deepened by the serpent's emergence, patches of scorched earth where sacred herbs had been burned, and the faintest traces of blood seeping into the soil. The elders had gathered there in the aftermath, their voices subdued but resolute, speaking in low tones about renewal and protection. They consulted the runes with reverence, seeking guidance for the days ahead. Freya, weary yet unbowed, became a pillar for the clan's fragile hope. The weight of leadership pressed upon her shoulders, but in the eyes of the villagers, young and old alike, she was a beacon. Mothers brought their children to her, their hands clutching trembling little ones who still whispered the serpent's name as if it might rise again from the depths. Warriors sought her counsel, their faces etched with scars of battle and nights spent wrestling with fear. Eirik stood beside her now, his presence a quiet testament to the power of transformation. The man who had once scorned her visions now bore the mark of shared understanding. A subtle shift in posture, a softer tone in his voice, a reluctant humility that had earned him newfound respect. Together, priestess and warrior stitched together the fraying bonds of the clan. Their alliance was not born of ease, but one morning, as golden light spilled over the fjord, Freya stood by the water's edge, the cold sea breeze tangling her dark hair. The village behind her was stirring with life, the clatter of oars, the calls of fishermen heading out to sea, and the laughter of children chasing one another through the fields. The scent of pine and salt filled the air, carrying with it the promise of renewal. Eirik approached silently, his footsteps muffled by the dew-soaked grass. The scar on his arm, a permanent reminder of the night when the serpent had revealed its truth, caught the sunlight in a fleeting glimmer. He paused beside Freya, their gazes meeting across the space between them. "The clan grows stronger," he said quietly. His voice lacked the sharp edge of former days, replaced by a calm certainty. "It is not just the strength of arms, but of spirit. We have faced the serpent and lived, not as enemies, but as kin." Freya nodded, the faintest smile touching her lips. "We were never meant to walk this path alone. The gods speak through many voices, mine, yours, the children's. Our fate is woven together." For a long moment, silence held them both, an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey they had shared and the road still ahead. Nearby, a group of villagers gathered around a fire, where Gunnar Halvorsen sat with a small bundle in his arms. Thora's eyes lingered on the child with a mixture of curiosity and quiet understanding. The boy, no more than a few months old, was the latest life to carry the clan's legacy forward, a symbol of hope born amidst uncertainty. As the sun climbed higher, Freya turned her attention to the preparations underway. New ships were being built along the shore, their hulks carved from the sturdy pines of the surrounding forests, ready to carry the clan to new lands. The elders spoke of journeys that would test the limits of their endurance and faith, but also promised renewal beyond the horizon. Freya's thoughts drifted to the future, a future shaped not by fear, but by the courage to embrace change. The serpent's coil was a reminder that life was a cycle of endings and beginnings, destruction and growth intertwined like the twisting branches of the ancient trees. That evening, as twilight settled over Ravnholm, Freya found herself once again at the stone circle. The air was cool, carrying the scent of burned herbs and fresh earth. The village lay quiet below, the faint glow of fires flickering in the windows of homes. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, ancient witnesses to the unfolding story. She raised her hands, feeling the rough texture of bark worn smooth from centuries of ritual. In the stillness, she whispered a prayer, not just for protection, but for understanding. The gods had shown her the serpent's coil, the eternal dance of life and death. It was not a curse to be feared, but a truth to be embraced. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the soft cry of a raven. Freya's eyes lifted to the dark bird circling overhead, a symbol of the clan, of wisdom, and of the spirit's endless flight. She smiled softly, the scars on her hands a testament to the sacrifices made. Around her, the stones stood firm, witnesses to the past and sentinels for the future. The serpent's shadow had passed, but its mark remained, a call to courage, to unity, and to the unyielding strength found in embracing the unknown. As the moon rose, pale and steady, Freya knelt, pressing her palm to the earth. She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse beneath her fingers, the heartbeat of the land, the breath of the gods, the unbroken thread of life. In that sacred moment, the clan's future shimmered before her, a path illuminated not by prophecy alone, but by the enduring spirit of those who dared to face the serpent's coil and walk into the dawn. The story of Ravnholm was far from over. It was a tale of transformation, written in blood, dreams, and the unyielding will to survive. And as the night deepened, the serpent's song became a quiet hymn, a reminder that every ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning. Beyond the fjord, the horizon stretched wide and endless, where sea met sky in a fragile embrace. The ships of the Raven clan awaited, their sails furled but ready to catch the winds whispered by the gods. Families gathered at the shore, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight and the pale glow of stars. Freya stood among them, her cloak drawn tight against the evening chill. Beside her, Thora held a small bundle of herbs and runes, her young face steady with the weight of her growing destiny. The girl's eyes shone with quiet determination, a beacon of the future to come. Ragnar stood nearby, his gaze fixed upon the waters, the lines of age and battle softened by a rare expression of hope. Eirik, no longer the doubter but a guardian, stood watchful and calm, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword, not in defiance, but in readiness. The village had been tested, its bonds stretched thin by fear and uncertainty. Yet now, as the night air carried the scent of salt and pine, there was a sense of renewal, like the first breath of spring after a long, harsh winter. Freya inhaled deeply, the cold air filling her lungs with a promise whispered by the gods themselves. The serpent had come to them not as a harbinger of doom, but as a symbol, a reminder of life's endless cycles, of death and rebirth intertwined. As the first sail was raised, catching the gentle breeze, the clan began to move forward, not fleeing the past, but carrying its lessons and scars as they embarked on a new journey. The sea stretched before them, vast and unknown, a mirror for the infinite possibilities ahead. Freya's gaze met Thora's, a silent vow passing between them. Together, they would carry the legacy of the ravens, the wisdom of the serpent's coil, and the unbreakable spirit of their people. The gods had spoken in dreams and signs, in visions and sacrifice, and the clan had listened. Their story was far from finished. It was only beginning. And beneath the endless sky, the serpent's eternal dance continued, a timeless rhythm of endings and beginnings, forever winding through the heart of the world. In that truth, the clan found their strength. In that truth, they found their hope. The first light of dawn broke softly over Ravnholm, spilling pale gold across the frost-tinged earth. The village stirred slowly, as if waking from a long, restless night. Freya stood at the edge of the stone circle once more, the cold biting through the layers of her dark blue tunic, but she barely noticed. Her breath came in steady clouds, mingling with the lingering mists that clung to the ground like ghostly veils. Around her, the ancient stones stood silent and watchful, their weathered faces bearing witness to centuries of rites, sacrifices, and whispered prayers. Tonight, they had held the weight of the clan's fate, and though the serpent had returned only as a shadow of its terrible power, its presence had shaken the very bones of the earth and the hearts of those who called Ravnholm home. Freya's gaze drifted toward the fjord, its waters calm now beneath the soft light of morning. Somewhere beneath those dark depths, the great serpent, Jörmungandr, coiled in silence, waiting, watching. The serpent's awakening had been a warning, but not the end. It was a call to change, to prepare, and to understand the threads that wove their lives into the vast tapestry of the god's design. Eirik's transformation echoed in her mind. The warrior who had once met her visions with scorn was now a steadfast ally. His eyes, once sharp and distrustful, now held a quiet wisdom born from seeing the truth through the shroud of fear. Their bond, forged in the crucible of shared ordeal, had become a symbol of the clan's fragile unity. She thought of Thora, the child whose innocent dreams had carried the weight of prophecy. The girl's pale hair caught the morning light as she approached, the star-shaped birthmark on her wrist still a glowing sigil of destiny. Freya knelt to meet her gaze, finding in those bright blue eyes a reflection of hope and the promise of renewal. "The serpent's coil is not a curse," Freya said softly, "but the eternal cycle of life and death. We are bound to its rhythm, just as the earth is bound to the turning of the seasons. To fear it is to fear ourselves." Thora nodded, her small hand slipping into Freya's large. Eirik stood beside Freya, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword, not in defiance, but in readiness. The scar on his arm, a lasting reminder of the knight's trials, caught the sunlight, a symbol etched in flesh of the price paid and the wisdom gained. Freya took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, the breath of the gods in the air. The serpent had come to them in dreams and fire, blood and shadow. It had demanded sacrifice, tested their faith, and revealed the fragile threads that bound them all. But it had also offered a gift, the chance to rise through the coils of fear and into the light of understanding. As the first sail unfurled, catching the gentle breeze, Freya's eyes met Thora's once more. No words were needed between them, only the silent vow that their journey was just beginning. The legacy of the ravens, the wisdom of the serpent's coil, and the unbreakable spirit of their people would carry them forward. The sea stretched before them, vast and unknown, a mirror of the infinite possibilities that awaited. Above, a raven soared, its black wings cutting through the morning sky. It circled once, a sentinel of the past and the future, then vanished into the vast blue. Its cry, sharp and clear, echoed over the water, a call to courage, to resilience, to faith. Freya's voice settled in the quiet space between heartbeats, a prayer carried on the wind. In the serpent's coil lies not only death, but rebirth. We walk the path not as victims of fate, but as makers of our destiny. The gods speak in dreams and signs, in shadows and blood. To listen is the greatest courage of all. The clan had learned that lesson beneath the blood-red moon, and now, as dawn broke over the fjord, they carried it forward like a torch into the unknown. The story of Ravenholm, the story of the Raven clan, was far from finished. It was a tale written in the language of sacrifice and hope, a song sung in the rhythm of the tides and the turning seasons. And as the ships slipped silently from the shore, cutting through glassy waters toward new horizons, the serpent's eternal dance continued, an unending cycle of endings and beginnings, woven through the heart of the world itself. In that endless dance, Freya found her peace. In that truth, the clan found their strength. And in that strength, they found hope. The gods had spoken, and the clan had listened. If you have been moved by this story, if the shadows of ancient dreams and the courage to face the unknown have stirred something within you, then this journey is not yet over. Subscribe, share, and join us as we continue to unravel the tapestry of Viking life, where every dream, every vision, every sacrifice echoes through time. Because in those echoes lies the truth of who we are and what we are willing to become. In the end, it is not the serpent's coil that defines us. It is the courage to face it, the strength to endure, and the wisdom to listen. Between the fire and the glacier, beneath the blood moon's watchful gaze, the Raven clan learned that the fiercest battles are often fought within, and that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from the sword, but from the heart. May their story inspire yours, and may the gods watch over your own journey, wherever it may lead.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. We're just getting started and we really need your support. And may the gods grant you a legendary life.